want a brand new Avatar series, like a fresh one. Not Korra, not Aang. I want an Earthbender Avatar. The next link in the chain. It's time. One fresh Avatar per decade. That's what I say. Let's go. Because I do feel like Avatar's back on the upswing. Through the 2000s and the early to mid 2010s, I feel like it was one of the defining franchises, well, for my generation, people older than me, younger probably. It's just a huge catchment zone. Really. This was animation to a lot of people and felt so different to many other shows in a similar age bracket. It felt like a game changer, a generation definer. The first 3 seasons of The Last Airbender were absolutely enormous. Each season, the hype grew and grew, and by the end of the 3rd season, it was revolutionary. To the point that Nickelodeon milked this bad boy for all it was worth, airing that 4-part finale as a single 2-hour movie, giving them a huge ratings boost. It truly was a different time. And then the show ended, and within 2 years we had the live-action movie trying to milk the cash cow again, and everybody was excited for it. Everybody was hyped, till it released and it was revealed to be very, very bad. And in hindsight, the warning signs were all there. But hey, I was a young teen. I didn't know any better. I was just eager for some more content. But hey, 2 years later than that, they washed off the stink of failure with the release of The Legend of Korra in 2012. And that would run for 4 seasons over the course of 3 years. And then I wouldn't say the popularity fell off a cliff, but it did fall into the background a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it was still popular, right? After all, they kept it going with comics and graphic novels and whatnot, and these graphic novels, every year they were the best sellers for Dark Horse Comics. So clearly they still had appeal, but it's like Harry Potter, one of the most popular and lucrative franchises of the modern era, of just in general. And it still makes a crap ton of money, no doubt. And when there is content for it, fresh content like the recent game or back when they released the play, it sells well and it's hyped up. But it is not the same as that peak when the books and the films were concurrently coming out in the 2000s. I mean, Pottermania was insane, and it was a lesser but similar effect for The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. But as long as it was constrained to graphic novels and comic books exclusively, it was never going to climb that mountain ever again. It was never going to hit that peak popularity. It needed more. And so when it went to streaming, it blew up again, what do you know? Massively. But this time, it was a newer generation that was embracing it. Kids and teens that were realistically only babies when the first season came out, if they were even born at all. Excuse me while I quickly weep at the inevitable passage of time. But yeah, as streaming does, it opened it up to a much wider audience, that fresh audience, but also bringing back the old nostalgia fans. I mean, it's how I got my girlfriend into it. And from there, it feels like they've been slowly building it up even more and more. They kept going with the graphic novels. They started doing prequel novels that follow some of the older avatars that they probably aren't going to cover with a film or a TV show. Characters like Kyoshi or Yang Chen. Although, I guess they could just adapt the books to screen at that point if there is interest, which I think there probably would be. It's Avatar. But I guess we'll have to wait and see on that score, won't we? But regardless, business picked up somewhat. And this led to another couple of announcements on top of that. They would be getting a fresh live-action adaptation from Netflix of The Last Airbender, which was a little bit spooky. After all, many of us do have PTSD from the first time round. And then there was also the news that the OG creators had formed their own studio and were producing content in the Avatar animated universe for streaming on Paramount+. Actually, no, having just looked it up, it's not for streaming on Paramount+ at all. It's for a theatrical release. And then they'll go on streaming on Paramount+ after they've had the theatrical run. And honestly, I think these films have a very, very good chance to do very well. For starters, I mean, the Demon Slayer Train movie made $500 million? And that was a more traditional animation, so it shows that this style can still draw a crowd. And I mean, Demon Slayer was also framed to a far more mature audience, as opposed to Avatar, which has a wider reach. It's more general, more kids. Plus, Avatar has the benefit of being part of a very well-known franchise, something Mario cashed in on recently to huge success, and it also has the nostalgia of being a film about Aang and his era of the show, which is the most popular of the two that we've seen on screen, I think. And then on top of that, we have the release of the Netflix show. And yeah, some people didn't like it, but I thought it was done really well. And it just, it did really well on streaming. I don't have the exact numbers on me right now, but it was top of the charts for 2 weeks. Huge watch time numbers, humongous. It was crazy. And so yeah, Avatar's coming back, kids. Hell yeah, it is back. Maybe not quite at the level it once was, just yet, but I think if the quality continues and we get more consistent content and the viewership stays up, it's going to be the franchise to watch in the 2020s. And yeah, I'm all about the films that are about Aang. There's no doubt about it. Aang, Sokka, Katara, Zuko, Toph, Suki, Appa, Momo, they're a draw. They're going to put the butts in the seats. That OG Team Avatar, the Gaang, People want to see it. Plus, I think there was something incredibly beautiful about that OG Avatar world before it started getting more advanced. Back when the world was just a little pre-industrial society for the most part. I don't think that's a controversial opinion. That's peak Avatar for a lot of people. And it was certainly a popular thought back when Korra was first released. People pushed back against the technology side of things. They didn't want things to advance. Because whilst that technological stuff was fun back when it was isolated to the Fire Nation, and was framed as something that Team Avatar had to fight back against, it became less fun when it got oversaturated, or at least for some people. And so from those perspectives, I think the decision to center the films around that most popular character in his popular era and start to slowly bridge that gap between the two avatars, that's a clever thing for the films to try to do. There's so much room for that trilogy to move into uncharted waters, so to speak, because there's whole decades of potential story that have gone untold. Lots of room to move. And like I said, that's probably what's going to make the fledgling studio the most money. That's what's going to draw the interest. That's what's going to spark the growth for the franchise. And then hell, they'll probably intend to go a bit further as well and make some Korra content at some point. Although, I do feel like there's probably less room to move with all that simply because of how much she has accomplished. Like, how much story could you feasibly tell? She's already proven herself to be one of the best avatars ever, right? But Aang, yeah, he beat the Fire Lord, but there's so much more he needs to do in order to get things in place for the story to pick back up in time for Book 1 of Legend of Korra. So I think that's a good place to start to fill in those blanks and build up the widespread appeal again. And that's all well and good. I get it, I truly do. Like, that is where the money's at. But regardless, I kind of want more. And after the film comes out in 2025, providing it does well, gets a good reception and earns some money, I don't see why we can't have a third series, right? A fresh Avatar. That is something that people have been clamoring for a very long time. I remember when Korra ended, people were already discussing who the next Avatar was going to be. What's the story going to be? When's it going to come out? But it never came. So a fresh Avatar, that's what people want. The next link in that Avatar cycle. An Earthbender. Keep the franchise chugging along. Keep the story moving. You can still have those movies being made about Aang and maybe eventually about Korra. But we also want more long-form content. Another TV show to sink our teeth into. And I'm saying our because, well, I assume that this is a decently popular sentiment still. I'd hope so, at least. Who the hell would turn up their nose at the idea of getting more content? Like, that would actually boggle my mind. But yes, a new Avatar, an Earth Avatar. That's what I want, and I think that's how the franchise needs to move forward. Otherwise, you'll eventually run out of places to go. I mean, I guess you could go backwards and see some of the older Avatars. There's been thousands after all, so you could literally do anything you want. And I mean, eventually I think they probably will go backwards, but I suspect it'll be in the form of films, one-offs, maybe some series. I don't know. I don't even know. I'm really just talking out my own ass here. Who really knows? Although, I think if you do go back in time, you're going to want to see something fresh, something different. So, either an airbender who's very different in temperament to Aang, because you don't want to be too samey, or we want to see Kyoshi. Just Kyoshi. She's hardcore, she's violent, unyielding, merciless. Hell yeah, gimme. And she lives for like hundreds of years, so there's plenty of story to tell there if they desire. So, if they don't go forward, they really should just make a Kyoshi show. But yeah, for the rest of this video, what I'm more interested in is sort of examining the story or the potential story of a future Avatar. After all, when we see Aang's era, it's a mostly pre-industrial society. Well, except for the Fire Nation, but the Earth and the Water Nations, they're less developed, and the Air Nomads are gone. But by the time of Korra's tenure, the world is very different. It's like this pseudo 1920s type of vibe. Film is starting to take off, radio's taken off, sports starting to go professional, get exciting, there's more technology, cars are here, that sort of thing. And so, by the time that Korra inevitably dies, the world will have moved on even further, because she's a late teen, early 20s person during this era. So, by our standards, she'd probably be born in, the 1890s, 1900s, something like that. So assuming she does not pull an Aang, which I doubt she would, she's going to get rather old. Let's be generous and say she'll live to her 80s. Seems fair for the time she was born, right? And she seems to be in pretty good nick. And that gets her to the equivalent time of around, the 1980s, assuming that tech keeps advancing at a similar pace. And so by the time that Avatar is ready to be the main character, which I'd assume is like minimum 12 years old, that was Aang's age, he's the youngest so far, we're suddenly looking at a world that resembles the 90s or maybe the 2000s. I don't know about you, but I don't know if that's something I'm too keen on. Like, maybe it could work in a Ponyo sort of way, where you're able to have a more modern vibe and all the spiritual stuff alongside it. I don't know, maybe even do it like a Spirited Away type deal. But I don't know, it also kind of goes against what you'd grown to expect from the franchise, right? Right? Doesn't it? It sounds kind of off to me. I mean, I'd give it a chance. It's still Avatar, but I just don't know. So I kind of just wanted to brainstorm, how could you make it work going forward in time? Because we're at that point where technology is already going to start to boom. I mean, they had a giant mecha robot before, and it shot a giant spirit laser. That's pretty advanced. I mean, they have little planes and cars and robots. So where does it stop? So either you have to have the time period stagnate with technology stopping evolving, which feels kind of unrealistic and not really in the spirit of the show, which partially shows how the growth of industry slowly encroaches on the natural and spiritual worlds. We see that in literally every season. Beyond that, I guess you could simply go with a modern vibe, like I said, which it feels risky, but it would also give a lot of opportunity for the Avatar to face those important questions head on. And I guess it also would be rather topical, considering the current environmental issues that we're dealing with in real life. Like, they could definitely do something with that. Either that or they could lean into some weird dystopian future type of deal to show how developing technology alongside a world of spirits would change things. And I mean, technically that Avatar world is more advanced than our world was. They have battle bots. So if you keep advancing that, is it going to turn into some cyberpunk dystopia by the 80s, by the 90s? It could do. And that could be really, really cool. Could be terrible, but it could be really cool. But then maybe there's like a Mad Max apocalypse type of world where there was a collapse of human civilization in the wake of Korra's death, whilst the new Avatar was a baby. That could also be interesting. That could also add something to the story, to the world. I don't know, that one might be a bit out there though. You might just have to bite the bullet and head towards the modern world, but you know, with mecha suits and robots. Maybe a cyberpunk Blade Runner-esque world would be a good fit. You know, that sort of plot. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, throwing stuff at the wall, see what sticks. We'll see. But I do think it's an idea that sort of deserves pondering. I don't think Korra should be the final chapter. Her story's opened up so many doors, so many directions you could go. It'd be a shame to stop there. She's ushered in this new golden age where she fixes everything and she's a total Chad. So I want to see what the consequences are when such a powerful person dies. When they're no longer around to fix things. What happens? Is there a power vacuum? Especially now with the spirits walking in the world? Oh, so much potential. But regardless, they're going to leave money on the table if they don't even try, in my eyes. And if it sucks, well, just pretend it doesn't exist. But yeah, beyond that, not really much else to say. And so with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the future of the Avatar franchise? Do you agree with me? Maybe they should keep pushing it forward, or do you just think they should stick with what they know works? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.